And we are continuing our gavel-to-gavel coverage for the trial of James Crumbley.
Closing arguments wrapped yesterday morning. Since then, the jury has been in deliberation. And our Andres Gutierrez has been following this case since the beginning. He's live outside the Oakland County courtroom now.
Meredith, we just learned that the jury is now in their lunch break, but if you've been keeping tally of yesterday and today, they were just about to enter their fifth hour of deliberation. So far, it has been quiet inside courtroom 2C where this trial is played out. They have had no questions for the court, and so again, all quiet inside the courtroom. That jury of 6 men and 6 women are considering the testimony of 16 different witnesses that they listened to over the course of 5 days. Now, before deliberations began, a couple of things happened. The jury picked 3 alternates, all of them women. One of them was a juror who expressed strong emotions during some of the testimony. Those 3 are at home this morning on standby just in case one of the 12 here in the courthouse gets sick. The judge also read the jury some instructions providing an explanation of the law and brought up that closing arguments shouldn't be considered as evidence, but there were several memorable moments that you can imagine made an impression on them. There was that moment during the rebuttal where the prosecution ended up inserting that cable lock on the murder weapon just to show one of the easy things that James Crumbley could have done to prevent this tragedy. Then there was the point that the defense attorney, Mario Lehman, brought up.
Mr. Wagrowski testified that James would have heard his son handling the firearm, the Kel-Tec that you saw the video of, where he sets the Kel-Tec on the table and loads the magazine. He slides the slide forward. He releases the slide forward. Mr. Wagrowski testified from this chair that James would have heard that because of the volume of the sound and because of the size of the home. You all have observed James throughout this trial. You've seen him. Judge Matthews instructed you at the beginning, James is wearing headphones. James is hard of hearing. He needs a hearing-assisted device to hear, even in this courtroom. And if you watched, there were points where he had to push the headphones into his ears so he could hear better because he still couldn't hear well enough.
Your Honor, I hate objecting in a closing, but that is not evidence, and that her client didn't testify, and so it's just not evidence what he was doing, and it's just not, and his headphones are not evidence.
There's evidence that he needs a hearing device, as I explained to you in the beginning of the trial why he was wearing those headphones.
And so again, the jury right now taking lunch. Once they get back, they'll be entering the fifth hour of deliberations. We'll be inside the courtroom monitoring any developments. Reporting live in Pontiac, Andres Gutierrez, CBS News, Detroit.
And Andres, give us a sense of how things will play out once a verdict is reached.
Yeah, if they go anything like it did in Jennifer Crumbley's case, we are anticipated to get a 15-minute heads up when they have reached a verdict. That gives enough time for both legal teams to enter the courtroom, and then also the members of the victims' families. They're actually right now in a courtroom just in a room rather just down the hallway here, and then security will be tight as was the case last time, where you had about a dozen deputies lined the inside of that courtroom, and then things will go rather quickly. The foreperson will read the verdict, and then the judge will provide a sentencing date. And because a gag order will be lifted once that verdict is reached, we are anticipated to hear from both sides. Exactly when that is yet to remain to be seen.
All right, thank you, Andres, for that report. And let's bring in our team of legal analysts now. We're joined today by Rick Convertino and Terry Johnson. Thank you both so much for being here. So do you both have experience within this Oakland County Courthouse?
Yeah, I do.
So just something that Andres mentioned, this really heavy security presence. What's the purpose of such a heavy presence?
I believe in this case, and it's probably excessive, but to protect all the parties against emotional outbreak or emotional response, including the defendant in this case, I would assume. I've had cases out there that had some security presence, not anything like this. So I just think it's more of a public display than it is a necessity.
And as the jury continues now with a full day of deliberations, Terry, how do you imagine that it's going to go based on the evidence that was presented to them?
Again, I think the prosecution did poke some holes strike that the defense poked some holes in the prosecution's case. And the question is there enough holes that are poked for them to come back with reasonable doubt? The interesting thing that we see so far, there have been no questions that have come back. So I don't know if someone's trying to convince someone of something, but no one has come back and said, we want more clarification, Your Honor, on something, or with this piece of evidence, can we get this piece of evidence to come back? So they're having probably a very vibrant discussion back in the jury room.
Yeah, because with Jennifer's trial, we got a question pretty early on.
Yeah, and here I quite honestly was expecting something. I mean, I know they deliberated maybe for an hour yesterday, but looking at this morning, we're about 3 hours in and nothing's come back in 3-4 hours between yesterday and today. I'm not sure what they're doing back there.
One of the things I wanted to point out that I thought during the closings was of some interest in that in Mr. Gutierrez's spot we saw again amplified was in the closing the defense attorney stressed that about Mr. Rogowski's testimony that it's more likely than not that the racking of the gun would have drawn the attention of James Crumbley, who was in a very small house and home at the time based upon the GPS, leading the intimation that James Crumbley was aware that his son was handling a weapon. Now, she pointed out, the defense attorney pointed out, well, that's not likely because you can see he's wearing headphones and he's hard of hearing and therefore, wouldn't have heard this. One thing I expected Ms. McDonald to do in rebuttal was to say, there's absolutely no indication, no evidence whatsoever that James Crumbley, not in 2014 on March 13th, whatever the day it was, that she did the closing, but in fact, on November 30th and thereabouts, was he hard of hearing? There's no indication of that in the substation interview in the back of the police car. There's no one who testified during the meeting with the administrators that he had a problem hearing and they had to repeat themselves. None of that. So kind of a point missed, but that's the kind of thing that a juror would pick up and say, somebody might say, well, he didn't hear that, and somebody else may say, you don't know if he, there's nothing on the tapes that show that he's hard of hearing.
Interesting point, Rick. Well, thank you both so much for being here. We will have you here sticking with us throughout the day as we await a verdict.
Thanks.
And as we have with all other hearings related to the Oxford shooting, we're covering this trial in its entirety as part of our community commitment. November 30th, 2021 was a day that not only impacted the village of Oxford, but also our state and the nation.
Head to our stream at cbsdetroit.com, Pluto TV, or the CBS News app for uninterrupted coverage once things pick up, or if the jury even has a question, we'll have that for you there.